And during this Christmas time, this is actually a special moment during the year. We all wait for it, anticipate it, the arrival of Christ, Jesus, God in the flesh, God being born. That's what we celebrate. And in fact, Christmas is so special that our clocks, our calendars, the very way that we measure time itself, is designed around Christmas. Our calendars were designed and intended to show that it has been 2019 years since Jesus' birth. 2019 years of celebrating Jesus' birth in the manger. And Christmas is this moment that has changed the world as we know it. And apparently Christmas is so important that back in November, I noticed the stores were already putting up Christmas decorations for us, right? Christmas has sort of taken over Thanksgiving's turf. And maybe you noticed it too. I notice for myself every year, Christmas gets a little bit bigger. More Christmas ornaments, right? We got to get a bigger tree. More Christmas lights to hang up. More decorations. Shoot, we have to keep buying Christmas ornament storage boxes to hold it all. And if we were trying, we would always want to maybe outdo last year, outdo previous Christmases. Christmas gets bigger and bigger. And I wanted to show you what Christmas almost seems to be like, at least in my mind sometimes when I picture it. So here's a little visual picture for you of how we often look at Christmas. So I've got this golden manger. Christmas gets bigger and bigger. And this classic scene that maybe we've seen hundreds of times, the nativity set, Jesus' arrival, the manger, it almost starts to take on this holy, sacred depiction in our minds. The manger is almost made of gold. And I don't know about you, but for some reason, whenever I picture that manger scene and I want to imagine what it would have been like to be there, I almost imagine the shepherds, they come rolling up in their pressed, clean outfits, right? Jesus, he's in there in the manger and he's almost glowing, right? With a little bit of light coming out from him. At least I see those on the side of the road sometimes. The manger is spotless. And all the animals, every time, I've noticed this, the animals are always lined up perfect so that they're all facing Jesus, right? There's no struggle like we saw with Josh with the goat. And in the background of that scene, there's almost this sound coming out, right? The manger. This is how I often picture Christmas in my mind. The manger in our mind is made of gold. Holy, sacred, unapproachable. See, this moment, after all, is pivotal. This is the moment that changed the world, how we measure time. But is this the real story? To answer our questions, we're going to look at a passage tonight that describes Jesus' birth for us. It's going to be in Luke chapter 2, verses 4 through 7, and I'll read them for you. So picking up in verse 4, it says, "So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloth and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them." When I think about the birth of my daughter Elizabeth, who was back in August, it's still fresh in my mind, and I can picture where she was born, a nice clean hospital. And even at home, I know she's got a room in the house just for her. She's got this beautiful crib, even though she likes to cry and sleep right beside us, right? She has space for her. But Jesus' birth couldn't have been more opposite than that. There was no room for him. He is born out in the barn. Jesus' crib is a food trough for farm animals. Josh gave us that great visual picture earlier with the goat. Farm animals are messy, noisy, smelly. We have plastic here. They didn't have plastic, right? It was everywhere. It was a mess in a barn. See, we look at the golden manger and the picture in our mind of what it must have been like to be there, right? But we so easily forget that the manger wasn't actually made of gold. Jesus is born into a literal mess, born into chaos. See, as we look at the golden manger, the picture in our minds of what it must have been like, we see the gold, the splendor, the majesty, the perfect, the sacred, the unapproachable. And that is not a depiction of what Jesus in the manger was like. In fact, the opposite. The gold, the majesty, the sacred, that's what Jesus left behind in heaven so that he could come to earth and be born into a mess. The gold is what Jesus surrendered so that he could be born in a barn. The picture of Christmas is that Jesus gave up the golden throne and took in its place the farm animal food trough, the manger. But why? Why would someone do that? See, on the golden throne in heaven, Jesus, the golden throne, perfect, holy, sacred, Jesus was unapproachable. I could never make it to him. And I mean, think about it. If I have a perfectly clean house, perfectly clean, I know that's kind of hard to imagine sometimes, but a perfectly clean house, what happens if someone with dirty shoes tries to come in? Either my house becomes dirty, not perfect, or I have to say, sorry, you have to leave your shoes at the door. Your shoes may not enter. If heaven is holy, clean, perfect, how in the world am I going to get there with dirty shoes? How can I get to heaven if my life is messy, broken? How can I get there if I've made mistakes before? How can I make it if I'm not perfect? I can't. The dirty shoes have to stay at the door. On the golden throne in heaven, Jesus was unapproachable. And so instead, Jesus came to us. He's born in a barn because he's meeting us in our house. He's meeting us in the mess, in the brokenness. Jesus' birth, Christmas, is this noisy, stinky barn with dirty animal food trough. This is a picture of how far the King of the universe would go to pursue you and meet you where you are. Now, at Jesus' birth, there's a foreshadow that happens of Jesus' future fate. The same phrase that describes how Jesus entered this world is the same phrase that gets used to describe how he leaves this world. We read that phrase earlier in Luke chapter 2, verse 7. It said, she wrapped him in clothes and placed him in a manger. Now later on in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23, it says, they take Jesus' body down from the cross, they wrap him in cloth, and they place him in a manger. Jesus exits this world with the same humility that he entered it. He came into this world, was born in a manger to meet us in the mess, in our house. And on the cross, Jesus is making the way so that we can finally meet him in his house. On the cross, Jesus is taking off our dirty shoes, taking the dirt for himself, and giving us his clean ones. Jesus is surrendering the golden throne to come meet us on earth and meet us in our mess. Why? To make us clean, to make us spotless, to make us holy, so that we can no longer have to wait at the door. Instead, he invites us in. Here's where Christmas starts to hit home. Are you ready? When Jesus entered this world, he entered into our mess, our brokenness, and no one makes room for him. There's no room at the inn. This Christmas, have you made room for Jesus in your life? He's made room for you. That's why he came. He's born in a barn to the smell of poop because he wants to find you. Have you made room for him in your life? And as you've been listening, maybe there's a few places you might find yourself in tonight. Maybe tonight your heart's telling you that making space for Jesus is something that you need to do tonight. If that's you, I would just encourage you that during the last few songs that we're going to sing together next, just spend that time. Maybe it just needs to be a silent time where you just reach out and talk with God. If that's something that you're doing for the first time tonight, I would just encourage you, come and find one of us pastors. We would love to pray and talk with you. If you're a little timid to come find us, if you fill out one of those little pink cards and give it to an usher as you leave, one of the guys with the green shirts, then this week we'll come and meet with you. Maybe tonight, though, you find yourself in a different place. Maybe this all is new to you. Maybe this is the first time you've ever heard about Christmas in this way. And now you're curious. If that's you, that is an awesome place to be at. It is great to have questions. Ask those questions. Be bold. In fact, the next few Sundays, we have specifically designed, hopefully, to help answer some of those questions you might have. This next Sunday, we're going to be giving some testimonies. You'll be able to hear about how God is still with us, still present. The arrival 2019 years ago, he's still with us. Maybe you find yourself in a little bit different place tonight. Maybe hearing about Jesus' arrival and his presence with us. Maybe that's something that's made you curious. You've wondered, maybe that's something you've never experienced before. And I would just encourage you, through January, we're going to be literally going through a series and studying growing closer to God. How is it that we have that connection with God and grow closer to him? That's a series for you. Now tonight, maybe you noticed as we start to close that through this whole service, we have only taken away lights. It started with the big, the shine, the bright, all the big lights on the stage. And we started this service with the golden manger in mind. Now, as we've started to wrap it away, we've seen how humbly Jesus entered this world. And now, for the first time in this service, during these next songs, we're actually going to start adding lights to this room. And the lights that we're going to add are humble candles, little candles. And those candles represent how Jesus has come into this world, brought his light into this world, come into the mess to meet us where we're at. You know, I don't know the circumstances that maybe you entered those doors with. Maybe it's pain, maybe it's a hurt, trouble, a mess. These candles represent that Jesus has come to meet us where we're at tonight. And as you hold that candle, it represents that he has come to meet you where you're at. Would you stand with me as we pray together? And then we'll sing together these last closing songs.